We spend so much time discussing the massive shifts in the automotive world, the self-driving software, these huge battery packs, the whole evolution of the traditional car.
Right. The big stuff.
The big stuff. But if you walk into any major European city today, the most compelling change isn't happening with the big luxury EVs. It's actually happening right at the other end of the spectrum.
The tiny stuff.
Exactly. We're seeing this quiet but really rapid transition toward these compact, light electric vehicles. And the question is, why are these small, sort of forgotten microcars suddenly driving a multi-billion-dollar business? And maybe more importantly, can this trend solve a massive industrial problem right here in Europe?
That is the perfect question to frame this deep dive.
Yeah.
The sources you provided are fascinating.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have this booming global market for quadricycles and tricycles, and on the other, this specific Italian case study,
Right.
FIPA S.p.A.
Right.
And they're trying to take this global trend and use it to reshore light automotive production back to Italy. It's a huge gamble.
So that's our goal today. We want to unpack this growth, the surprising market size, what's driving it, and the strategy behind FIPA picking a place like Turin, an automotive heartland that's been struggling, to launch its big comeback.
Okay, so to set the stage, we should probably clarify what we mean by microcar, because legally they're not really cars. We're mostly talking about quadricycles.
So what are they exactly?
They're four-wheeled vehicles, and they're defined by European standards into two key categories. You have the L6E, which are light quadricycles. They're capped at a max speed of 45 kilometers per hour.
So pretty slow, city speeds.
Exactly. And then you have the L70, those are the heavy quadricycles, and they can get up to 90 kilometers per hour. That distinction is really important.
Yeah, because it dictates who can drive them, right? And what kind of safety rules apply.
Precisely. In a lot of European countries, you can drive an L6E vehicle at a younger age, sometimes without a full driver's license. It's a huge accessibility point, but it comes with some major caveats on safety that we'll definitely get into.
Okay, let's dig into the sheer scale of this market, because I think when people hear micromobility, they think niche, a hobbyist thing maybe, but the numbers tell a completely different story.
They really do. The data shows the global market for these was valued at $10.04 billion in 2025.
10 billion for tiny cars.
10 billion. And it's not just big, it's growing aggressively. The projection is for it to more than double to over $22.4 billion by 2034.
Wow. What's the growth rate on that? The KAGR is
10.55%.
at 10.55%, a 10.5% compounded growth rate over a decade. That's not just a trend. That signals like a fundamental shift in how people are thinking about transport.
It's a structural change.
Yeah.
And if we look at where that value is concentrated right now, Europe is holding the lion's share.
See, that's what surprised me. Usually when we talk about high-volume, lower-cost vehicles, all eyes are on Asia. But Europe is dominating here with a 42% global market share?
Substantial 42%, yeah. That's valued at about $6.9 billion this year alone. It's mostly because of that mature regulatory framework we just talked about. Europe figured out the L6E and L70 standards early.
But I imagine Asia is catching up fast.
Oh, absolutely. You're right to look east. While Europe is the dominant market today, Asia-Pacific is the fastest growing region. It's projected at a 7.3% CAGR through 2032. So Europe is definitely looking over its shoulder.
And I'm guessing the engine behind all this literally is electric.
It absolutely is. Electric propulsion already has a 58% market share. And that's expected to hold, driven by clean air mandates and, frankly, just better cost effectiveness.
Which brings us to how these things are actually being used.
Right, because personal use is still the biggest chunk, right?
Yeah.
Something like 73% of the market.
A massive 73% share. But here's where it gets really interesting for investors. The fastest growing segment is commercial applications.
Last mile delivery, small goods transport. Exactly. That segment is projected at a 7.1% VAGR. It's not just about an individual parking a tiny car. It's about whole companies rethinking their logistics from the ground up.
And that growth is a direct answer to what the sources call the urban squeeze.
It is. I mean, think about the numbers. Urban populations are projected to hit 68% of the global total by 2050.
68%. That number alone means you have to completely rethink how things move in cities. A normal car is, 4 meters long? These quadricycles are typically 2.3 to 3 meters.
They're designed for a world where space is the most valuable currency. They solve congestion and parking in a way an SUV just can't.
And this feeds directly into the e-commerce boom. The demand for instant last-mile delivery is just exploding.
This is where those heavier L70 quadricycles really shine. especially the little cargo van versions. They can carry a serious amount of stuff, often up to 450 to 600 kilograms.
That's a huge payload for something so small.
It turns the quadricycle from just a commuter vehicle into a proper commercial tool. And the economics are just undeniable.
The sources highlighted that electric quadricycles have a 40% lower last-mile delivery cost compared to a conventional light commercial vehicle.
40%. If you're running a delivery fleet, a 40% cut in operating costs it's a game changer.
So what enabled this? It must be the technology, specifically the batteries.
It's almost entirely the batteries. I mean, think about the cost drop. A battery pack was about $1,200 per kilowatt hour back in 2010.
And today?
Today, it's around $150.
That's an incredible drop. Almost 90%. That's the engine driving this whole thing. It took these from being like an expensive novelty to a viable commercial option.
And that price drop translates directly into performance. The range isn't a joke anymore. We've moved past the old 50 or 75 kilometers.
Now we're seeing premium models hit, what, 120, 160 kilometers?
Exactly. That's more than enough for a full day of urban logistics work.
Okay, so it sounds like a perfect storm of growth, tech, and policy. But we have to ask the question, what are the sacrifices? What do you lose for all this smallness and this specific regulatory class?
Well, the primary limitation, and it's the elephant in the room, is safety.
Right.
The whole reason the L6E and L7E classifications exist is so these vehicles don't have to meet the same crash standards as passenger cars. They don't have the same airbag systems. They don't have the advanced driver assistance.
You're talking about basic structural integrity.
Yes. And the data is pretty sobering. I mean, back in 2014, the Euro NCAP tested a vehicle called the Tazari Zero. It got a 1-star rating.
1 star.
That safety gap is why these are still seen as, a secondary hyperlocal vehicle. They're not replacing the family car for a long trip.
And that safety issue must feed right into the second big constraint, which is competition and cost.
Absolutely.
It's hard to justify spending, say, $10,000 to $30,000 on a quadricycle when you have so many other options. You've got e-scooters and e-bikes for under $3,000 for a really short trip.
And then on the other end, you have traditional compact EVs, a Fiat 500e or a Renault Zoe. They're becoming much more competitive on price, and they give you highway capability, better weather protection, and, critically, much better safety.
So that's the complex global backdrop. Huge demand, but also real limitations and fierce competition. And that high-cost environment, especially with logistics, is exactly what this Italian company, FIPA, is betting on.
Yes, exactly. This is the pivot point. The move to FIPA, which stands for Fabbrica Italiana Produzione Auto, is the whole story here. This company is an industrial evolution of a company called Desner.
And Desner, they were an importer, right? They were bringing models like the Lojo W300 and the Palco P300 into Europe.
They were. So they learned the market. They understood the product inside and out. They saw the demand firsthand.
And now they're trying to shift from being the importer of the know-how to being the manufacturer of the actual product.
That's the key distinction. FIPA's entire goal is an act of reindustrialization. They want to bring the production processes, the competencies, everything that was developed abroad back to Italy. They want to build these L6 and L7 vehicles for the European market in Europe. They're going from trading to building.
And this choice, it can't just be nostalgia. I mean, European labor costs are higher. There has to be a cold, hard industrial logic behind this.
And there is. It's strictly industrial. The sources point to two main things: rising structural logistics costs and, well, the general scaling back of globalization.
The supply chain nightmares of the last few years.
Exactly. It suddenly makes a European production base incredibly strategic. You shorten your supply chain, you mitigate risk, you get a more direct, transparent relationship with your customer from sales all the way through to maintenance. It's about de-risking the future.
FIPA also calls itself an industrial platform. That sounds a little like corporate jargon, but it must mean something specific about how they plan to operate.
It does. An industrial platform is designed to be really flexible. So instead of one giant specialized factory, it's a structure designed to bring together several different, smaller production lines under one roof.
So you can build passenger versions, cargo versions, L6E, L7E, all in one place.
Exactly. It makes that kind of diverse, lower volume manufacturing economically viable because they share all the infrastructure and logistics. It's efficiency that's tailored for micromobility.
And they're aiming for a pretty significant scale. The project targets 2026 for its first output, with a goal of producing up to 30,000 electric vehicles a year.
And crucially, the chosen city is Turin,
which has this incredibly deep historic automotive culture.
The choice of Turin is so powerful, both practically and symbolically. This is where Italian automotive competence has its strongest roots. You have generations of know-how there.
And that leads us to the specific site they're looking at, which really puts a human face on this whole thing. They're interested in the idled Lear Corporation plant in Grugliasco, just outside Turin.
A plant that was a casualty of the collapse of traditional auto manufacturing in Italy. FIPA is literally stepping in to avoid
A physical and a cultural void.
a profound act of regeneration. We saw an announcement earlier this year, I think it was September, from ITB Auto, which markets the Desner brand. They outlined an investment of about 100 million euros to produce 20,000 minicars a year there, initially.
And even more important than the money is the jobs. That's the core social challenge there.
Absolutely. The initial goal is to re-employ between 200 and 250 of the 376 workers who lost their jobs when the plant shut down.
And they're moving fast. Production is scheduled to start in the first quarter of 2026.
It's an aggressive timeline. It signals a real commitment to turning that industrial hardship into an actual opportunity.
So, given the scale of this, what kind of backing and, I guess, oversight is FIPA getting?
Well, the project is being coordinated by the Ministry of Enterprises and Made in Italy, so it's clearly a national priority. They see this as a model for reindustrialization.
But I imagine the unions are watching closely.
Very closely. Groups like FIMSISL and FIAM-TRIGL have responded with what you'd call cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism. What are their concerns?
They see it as a positive step, of course, but they're demanding rigorous checks on the, and I'm quoting here, the financial and market strength of the investors.
They want to make sure this is for real, that it's sustainable.
Exactly. They want to ensure this isn't just a short-term venture, but a real plan that guarantees long-term employment for those workers. The focus isn't just on the ribbon cutting, but on the long-term viability.
So, when you boil it all down, what does this all mean for you, our listener? I think the crucial takeaway is that the future of urban mobility is being defined not just by, huge technological leaps, but by these highly targeted, regulated, lightweight solutions.
And FIPA's bold move in Turin shows us that this global demand for micromobility is finally strong enough to justify ambitious macro-industrial policy.
Right. It's positioning Italy to be a key European manufacturing hub for this entire growing category. It's a compelling collision of micro-demand and macro-revitalization.
It is. But let's leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Oh.
The whole FIPA initiative is driven by the need to avoid the rising costs of global logistics. That makes sense. But manufacturing in Italy, even with these clever industrial platforms, is still fundamentally more expensive than in Asia-Pacific, which is the fastest-growing market. So the question is, will the high cost of a made-in-Italy vehicle ultimately undermine the very affordability that these things need to achieve mass adoption? Can they compete against fierce, low-cost global competition?
That challenge, balancing quality production with affordability.
That is the true long-term test for the entire European microcar revolution.
That is a fascinating challenge to close on. It just shows how interconnected urban mobility and national economics have become. Thank you for walking us through these complex sources for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And since today is Tuesday, December 23rd, 2025, we just want to take a moment to thank you for sharing your time with us. We wish you and yours a wonderful holiday season and a very Merry Christmas.